I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. I lost my job today. Just needed someone to talk to. It wasn't even that dramatic. No crying emojis, no long paragraphs. Just one simple sentence. The kind of thing you send to the people who are supposed to care. It dropped into the family group chat. Fam bam heart. Like a stone sinking into water. The names lined up above it like a little parade. Mom, Dad, Andrew, Maya. My family. I waited. At first I thought maybe they were busy. Mom could be at her book club. Andrew worked late sometimes. She was probably on TikTok or with her boyfriend. But then the read receipts started coming in. Seen by Mom. Seen by Maya. Seen by Andrew. No typing bubbles, no follow-up. Not even a stupid thumbs-up emoji. I put the phone down. Got up. Walked to the kitchen. Poured water. Walked back. Still nothing. I opened Instagram. Maya had just posted a story. Her smiling with a matcha latte. The caption said, "Treating myself heart." 2 minutes ago. Andrew had already liked it. Mom commented, "My beautiful girl." I closed the app. Opened the group chat again. Still nothing. I typed, question mark, question mark. Backspaced it. Typed, seriously? Deleted that too. I didn't want to come off as needy. Didn't want to give them more reason to think I was too sensitive. Because that's the thing, right? If I stay quiet, no one checks in. If I speak up, I'm dramatic. If I cry, I'm unstable. If I don't, I'm cold. It's like there's no version of me they know how to hold. I sat back down on the couch, the silence in my apartment now louder than ever. My phone buzzed. Just a promotional email. Nothing from them. I stared at that message I'd sent. Just 10 words. I lost my job today. Just needed someone to talk to. That was it. That was the ask. And it was met with silence. Not because they didn't see it, but because they didn't feel the need to respond. And somehow that hurt more than any argument ever could. I didn't expect them to fix it. I didn't want money or advice. I just wanted to not feel invisible for once. Instead, I got a wall of nothing. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time. I could list a dozen others. Moments where I reached out. Small cries for help, tiny cracks in the calm exterior. And was met with the same cold indifference. Seen, ignored, forgotten. But this time, it stuck. This time I didn't tell myself. They're just busy. This time I realized, maybe I've never really been someone worth responding to in their eyes. 3 days later, I finally brought it up. Mom called, not to ask how I was doing, but to see if I could help Maya edit her resume. That's always how these calls went. No, how are you? No, I saw your message. Just a task, a request, a favor. And because I was still me, the one who says yes, I agreed. I even made a few notes for Maya, like the dutiful daughter they all expected me to be. But just before the call ended, I said carefully, "Hey, I texted the group chat a few days ago. I had kind of a rough day. It really hurt that no one responded." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the shift in her breathing. Then she gave a little laugh, tight and dismissive. "Oh, Claire," she said, "don't be so dramatic. Everyone's been busy. You can't expect people to drop everything because you had a bad day." She said it like I'd accused them of a crime, like expecting the bare minimum, a text, a hang in there, a sign I existed, was some grand emotional demand. I wanted to say, I wasn't expecting everything. I just wanted something. But I didn't. Instead, I went quiet. The kind of quiet that builds in your chest like fog, thick and heavy and unbreathable. "You've always been a little sensitive when things don't go your way," she added. "You just need to toughen up, sweetie. Everyone has rough days." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Said, "Okay." Let her hang up first, and then I just sat there. Not crying, not angry, just tired. Because this wasn't new. It wasn't just this week or this message. It was years of being told that my hurt was imaginary, that my feelings were exaggerated, that I was too much every time I needed someone to lean on. And the worst part? They said it so gently, so reasonably that I started to believe them, started to think I really was the problem. That maybe I really was overreacting all these years. That maybe if I just stayed quiet, I could finally become the kind of daughter who was easy to love. But staying quiet never earned me anything, except more silence in return. So I stopped. Not because I gave up, but because I finally understood. You can't force people to hear you when their comfort depends on your silence. They called me dramatic for speaking up. Fine. Then silence is my new language. I was the middle child, which in theory should have meant balance. Instead, it meant invisibility. My older brother Lucas was the strong one. Loud, confident, charismatic. The kind of kid who argued with teachers and still got praised for leadership potential. If he got into trouble, it was brushed off with a laugh. And that's just Lucas being Lucas. My younger sister Emily was the delicate one, always clinging to Mom's side, crying over small things, nervous about new experiences. She was sensitive, intuitive, such a sweetheart. Everyone adored her, protected her, tiptoed around her emotions like she was made of glass. And then there was me. Claire, the one who didn't ask for much, the one who played quietly by herself in the corner, the one who could sit through dinner without interrupting, the one who packed her own lunch in 3rd grade because Mom forgot, again, and didn't want to cause a fuss about it. They called me easy, independent, mature for your age. It was meant to be a compliment, and for a while I took it as one. When you're a child, you don't know the difference between praise and neglect. You just know attention feels good, and the absence of it feels like your fault. Lucas would get a round of applause for scoring a goal, even if he got a yellow card 5 minutes later. Emily would get an ice cream cone for surviving a dentist appointment. I got a quiet nod when I brought home straight A's. No fuss, no hugs, just, "Good job, Claire." I remember one night, Lucas had a meltdown over not being allowed to stay out late. Emily had a fever and was crying in Mom's lap. I stood at the hallway corner watching, holding a drawing I'd made for Dad's birthday. No one noticed I was there, so I turned and put it on the kitchen counter myself. The next morning, Dad said it was nice, then moved on. I learned early, if I wasn't a problem, I didn't need solving. If I didn't cry, I didn't need soothing. If I didn't shout, I didn't need attention. I became my own comfort, my own support system, my own audience. People always say middle children are resilient, but no one ever asked what they had to survive to become that way. At school, I was the kid who remembered her assignments, who lent out pens, who got along with everyone. I was the helper, the good student, the rule follower. At home, I was the one they forgot to pick up from soccer practice. Twice. The one who always had to sit in the middle seat during road trips. The one who got hand-me-downs that were too big and never got tailored. But I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't complain, because I thought that was what love looked like. Earning it by not needing it. And when Emily cried over a broken toy and Mom rushed to fix it, I told myself, good, she needs more than I do. When Lucas got grounded but still had Dad sneaking him snacks, I thought, that's fine. He takes up more space in the world. Me? I took pride in being small. It wasn't until much later that I realized they didn't love me less. They just loved me quietly. Until that quiet turned into absence, and by the time I realized I needed more, I'd already trained them to believe I didn't. My birthdays were always functional. A grocery store cake, maybe a last-minute card. Sometimes they'd forget to light the candles. One year, Mom handed me an envelope before dinner and said, I didn't have time to wrap anything, but you can buy yourself something nice, okay? I was 11. I used the money to buy a book I'd already read from the library 3 times. Emily's birthdays, though. They were events, balloon arches, themed decorations, cupcakes with edible glitter. One year she had a backyard unicorn party with a rented pony and a full dessert table. Another year it was a spa day, complete with robes and foot soaks for her and her friends. I didn't complain. I really didn't. I told myself she deserved it. She was more social, more cheerful, more fragile. She needed it more. That phrase, needs it more, became a justification for everything. When Emily cried after getting a B on a math test, she got frozen yogurt and a pep talk. When I got an A- and frowned, Mom said, "You're being too hard on yourself, relax." When I got quiet after losing my spot on the debate team, I overheard her tell Dad, "Claire takes everything so seriously, she'll get over it." Emily once got the flu and cried for 2 days. I sprained my wrist at school and Mom texted, "Take some Advil, you'll be fine." I don't think it was malice. I don't think anyone sat down and decided, let's give Claire less. It was more subtle than that, more dangerous. It was the slow shaping of my emotional landscape. where sadness made people roll their eyes, where disappointment was overreacting, where vulnerability became a kind of weakness. When Emily cried, she was tender-hearted. When I cried, I was dramatic. So I stopped crying. Simple as that. I learned that any expression of pain was a liability, that the safest path to love was silence and self-management. I became an expert at smiling when I felt hollow, at saying it's fine before anyone even asked, at pre-shrinking my emotions to a socially acceptable size. The less I felt, the less I got in trouble. And isn't that what every kid wants? To not get in trouble? I thought this was maturity, that it made me strong, that not crying meant I was winning some secret game of resilience. But now I look back, and all I see is a little girl who desperately wanted to be noticed, and who slowly learned that being good meant being invisible. Teenage years are supposed to be loud, but for me they were quiet in all the wrong ways. By high school, I'd learned to stay on the edges of conversations, especially family ones. At dinner, I'd start a sentence only to be interrupted by Lucas or Emily. When I paused thinking someone might circle back to what I was saying, no one ever did. It wasn't always cruel, sometimes it was just habitual. Mom would ask how school was. I'd say something about a project I was proud of. And she'd nod, then pivot to asking Lucas about his football practice or Emily about her art class. Like my answer was just a formality to get through. If I brought it up, if I said something like, "You never ask me follow-up questions," Mom would frown and say, "Why do you always focus on the negative, Claire?" Negative. That word followed me like a shadow. If I voiced frustration about a teacher, I was complaining too much. If I mentioned feeling left out at school, I was being too sensitive. If I suggested maybe we should all listen more during dinner, Dad would sigh and mutter, "Here we go again." It was a pattern, one I didn't have the words for back then. The moment I disrupted the comfort of others, I became the problem. There was one night that sticks with me more than the rest. Emily had just gotten her driver's license. She clipped the mailbox backing out of the driveway, scraped the car badly. Dad was furious for about 3 seconds, then saw that she was crying and backed off immediately. Mom rushed out and said, "It's okay, honey." These things happen. 2 weeks earlier, I'd come home with a B+ on a chemistry test, my lowest grade all semester. When I showed it to Dad, trying to explain how I'd studied but messed up one formula, he said, "You're slipping. You're not pushing yourself hard enough. No hugs, no it happens. Just a lecture." I remember sitting in my room that night, staring at both of those scenes in my head, Emily's tears and my silence, and realizing emotions only earned softness when they came from someone else. Mine didn't count. Mine made people uncomfortable. I tried to change the narrative. I tried being upbeat. I tried smiling more, keeping my tone light, pretending nothing ever stung. But even then, the label stuck. One day, I gently pointed out to Mom that she'd forgotten to include me in a family lunch plan she made with Emily and Lucas. Her response, "Oh, Claire, you always make everything such a big deal." I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't guilt-tripped anyone. I'd simply said, "Hey, I think you forgot me." And that was enough to be branded the dramatic one. Again. That's when I stopped offering ideas. Stopped joining conversations that didn't explicitly ask for me. Stopped trying to suggest the weekend activities or recommend restaurants. Because no matter how small or reasonable my words were, they were always heard through a filter of, "Here she goes again." And after a while, I started to believe it. Maybe I was the problem, and maybe I was just wired wrong. Too needy, too heavy, too much. I didn't realize until years later that I wasn't too much. I was just being measured by people who had no idea how to hold anything real. It happened the fall of junior year. Up until then, I'd kept my world small. I wasn't one of those girls who bounced from group to group. I had one best friend, Natalie. She was the first person outside of my family who made me feel interesting, seen, like I could be something more than the background. We met in 8th grade and had been inseparable ever since. Shared playlists, sleepovers, secret nicknames. We knew everything about each other, or at least I thought we did. So when she started pulling away that year, answering texts slower, always busy, suddenly sitting with other people at lunch, I noticed. But I didn't want to seem clingy. I waited. I gave space. I told myself not to overthink. Until the day I walked into the library and found out from someone else, casually, as if I already knew, that she was throwing a birthday party that weekend. One I wasn't invited to. I checked my phone thinking maybe she texted me, maybe it got lost, but there was nothing. I blinked at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't believe it. I worked hard. The project deserved the attention. I'd earned it. But because for the first time I saw my name in a public space, surrounded by praise, and I didn't feel like a fraud. Later that day, I opened Facebook for the first time in the weeks. And there it was. My mother had shared the article, captioned, "So proud of our daughter Claire and all her accomplishments. Always knew you'd do great things." Always knew. I stared at those words, blinking slowly, not because they hurt, but because they felt like a stranger's voice wearing my mother's face. Underneath, distant relatives commented, "How, didn't know Claire was in design. She was always so creative as a kid. Congrats to the family." To the family. As if this had been some group effort. As if they'd raised me on encouragement and paintbrushes and dreams. As if they hadn't spent years looking through me like I was glass. I didn't comment, didn't like the post, didn't react at all, because none of this was for me. It was for her, her social media image, her circle of curated acquaintances, her peace of mind that she hadn't failed as a mother, even if she had. The emails came next. First from Emily. Subject line, "Hey, stranger message. Saw the article, miss you, let's catch up soon. Maybe coffee?" I stared at it for a long time. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I could have written, "Where were you when I needed a sister?" I could have asked, "Do you even remember why we stopped talking?" But I didn't write anything, because I knew the answer. She remembered. She just didn't want to say it out loud. Then came the message from Mom. Text this time. "Let's start over. We were all under pressure back then. Families fight, but we're still family." I read it twice. There was no apology. No, "I'm sorry for not hearing you." No, "I was wrong." Just an attempt to wipe the slate clean without touching the damage, like painting over a cracked wall and calling it new. For a second my thumb hovered over reply. I considered it, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because I wanted to explain, to make them understand why I couldn't. But I stopped myself. Because here's what I've learned. Healing doesn't require a round-trip ticket. Sometimes you outgrow people the same way trees outgrow the pots they were planted in. And trying to go back just means stunting your own roots. I never blocked them. I didn't rage post or write a long letter. I didn't argue or defend myself. I just left the message there. Unread, unanswered, unnecessary. It's not that I hate them, I don't. I simply don't need them to approve of me anymore, don't need them to validate my pain or rewrite our history or suddenly act like nothing happened, because something did happen. And I'm not pretending it didn't just so they can feel comfortable again. My life now isn't perfect, but it's mine. I still see Jess regularly. We become a strange kind of chosen family. She comes over for movie night, sends me memes at 2 a.m. We don't say things like, "I'll always be here for you." We just are. I light candles when I want to feel safe. I take walks when I need silence. First journal, I draw, I building. I've learned to ask myself, what do I want to feel today? Instead of, what would make everyone else feel better? My apartment isn't big. My furniture doesn't match, but it's the first place that's ever felt like home. Not because of who's in it, but because of who I've become in it. Sometimes I still get messages. A forwarded meme from Dad, a tagged memory from Lucas, Emily commenting hard on a post like we never stopped speaking. And maybe to them that's enough. Maybe they think I'm just being stubborn, that eventually I'll come around, that this is just another emotional phase. But I know better now. You called me dramatic for bleeding. Now that the wound is healed, you pretend it never happened. I remember. I moved on. I just didn't take you with me. When I finally asked her about it, tried to keep my voice calm, she just shrugged and said, "I figured you wouldn't be into that kind of thing. You don't really vibe with my friends." That was it. Years of closeness gone in a sentence, shrugged off like I was a misfit t-shirt that didn't go with the new outfit. I remember going home that day, sitting on my bed, and staring at the wall. I didn't cry right away. It wasn't the dramatic, sobbing kind of pain. It was quieter, heavier, like something had caved in inside my chest. Later that night, when I told my mom, hoping maybe for once she'd understand, she just shook her head and said, "Oh, Claire, everyone goes through stuff like this in high school. Friends come and go. Don't make it bigger than it is." That was it. No hug, no pause, No, that sucks, I'm sorry. Just don't make it a big deal. And in that moment, it hit me. This was the pattern. Pain only counted if it was someone else's. Frustration only mattered when it made them uncomfortable. Sadness was acceptable in very small, polite doses. Anything more, and I was doing too much. I didn't talk about Natalie again. I stopped mentioning things that hurt at school, stopped sharing stories that made me feel too raw, too exposed, too easy to dismiss. Because why speak if no one really hears you? Why reach out if they will only call it reaching too far? That year, I learned how to smile through disappointment, how to act like being left out didn't sting, how to carry my heartbreak in silence so it didn't take up anyone's space. And when my mom told my aunt later that year, Claire's always been so emotionally steady, like a rock, I wanted to laugh. I wasn't steady. I was shut down. There's a difference. It wasn't that I needed drama. I didn't want pity. I just wanted permission to feel. But over and over, my reality was rewritten. I'm sure she didn't mean to hurt you. You probably took it the wrong way. You're just sensitive. Try to be more forgiving. You're always making everything such a thing. So eventually I stopped trusting my own emotional compass. If I felt pain, I questioned it. If I felt angry, I silenced it. If I felt left out, I blamed myself. Because that was easier than constantly being told I was wrong for feeling anything at all. Looking back, I wish I could go back and hug that version of me. The girl who sat alone in her room that night after the party, trying to make sense of why losing someone you loved wasn't enough of a reason to fall apart. The girl who felt emotions like thunder but was told to whisper them. The girl who wanted to say, "This hurts," but instead said, "It's fine." You can only be told you're been too much so many times before you believe it. Only be met with blank stares so often before you stop looking for connection. Only be dismissed so regularly but before you start dismissing yourself. And eventually you start to wonder if you were ever meant to be listened to, or just tolerated. It was the first family gathering I'd been to in almost a year. I told myself I'd just stop by, stay for an hour, be polite, and leave before anything could disappoint me. But I should have known. Disappointment isn't something that waits for a permission. It just shows up, uninvited, quiet, and cold. When I walked into the house, no one even looked up. Not really. Lucas gave me a vague "hey" while scrolling through his phone. Emily smiled and went back to talking with our cousin in the kitchen, and Dad was outside grilling with the uncles. Mom walked by with a tray of mini quiches, glanced at me, and said, "Glad you made it, sweetheart," in that tone that felt more like obligation than welcome. There was no hug, no "how have you been," no "tell me what's going on in your life." I stood in the hallway for a beat too long, holding a bottle of wine I'd brought, unsure where to put it. No one offered to take it. I placed it on the counter beside half-empty soda bottles and paper plates. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, clinking glasses, but it might as well have been white noise. I wandered into the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, tried to blend in, smiled when people laughed, even though I wasn't part of the joke, refilled my own cup twice. No one noticed when it ran low. No one noticed at all. Half an hour passed. An hour. No one asked me anything. About work, my apartment, my health. Not even a generic "what's new?" Nothing. I looked at Emily animatedly telling a story about some yoga retreat, Lucas talking to our aunt about a new investment, Mom moving smoothly around the kitchen, hosting as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. Not because they said something cruel, but because they said nothing at all. I walked out to the back deck. The air was cooler there, quieter. I sat on the patio chair, legs tucked under me, staring at the string lights overhead. I don't know how long I sat there before Mom walked out holding a tray of fruit. "Oh, there you are," she said, setting the tray down. "I was wondering where you went." "I've been here," I said. "Just sitting." She smiled tight. "Everything okay?" And something in me broke. "No," I said softly. "Actually, no, it's not." She froze, clearly surprised. "I feel like I don't matter to this family," I said, each word sharp and deliberate, as if I had practiced them in my head for years. Maybe I had. Mom's face shifted, not into concern, into defense. Her eyebrows pulled together, lips tightening into a half-frown. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice clipped. Don't be so emotional. You always twist things. There it was. The script, line for line, as if she'd been waiting for me to make this scene so she could shut it down. I'm not twisting anything, I said. I'm telling you how I feel. You always think we're attacking you, she said, laughing under her breath now, brushing imaginary crumbs from her shirt. We're just trying to enjoy a nice afternoon, and now you're making it into something dramatic. I stood up. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, but I made sure every word landed. You didn't hear me when I was quiet. Now that I'm loud, you call me dramatic. She blinked, stunned. You know what's dramatic? I continued. The way you all ignore me unless I'm doing something helpful. The way you ask about Emily's plans, Lucas's job, but never mine. The way you forget I'm even in the room until I speak up. And then suddenly, I'm the problem. Dad had stepped outside by then. Lucas, too. Emily was at the doorway, frozen. Everyone had heard. No one said a word. I've spent my whole life trying not to take up space, I said. Trying to be easy, quiet, good. And you all loved that version of me, didn't you? The one who never interrupted, the one who never asked for anything. Silence. Mom's mouth opened like she might argue, but nothing came out. I showed up today hoping things had changed, that maybe someone would ask about me, maybe someone would see me, but you didn't. You never do. Emily finally said something. Claire, come on, this isn't the time. Not the time. I turned to her. When is the time, Emily? When I'm gone. When I stop showing up altogether? Don't be dramatic, Lucas muttered. And that was the last straw. I looked around at their faces, familiar but distant, like people who had memorized the shape of me but never cared to know what was underneath. I'm not dramatic, I said, calm now, deadly calm. I'm just done pretending your silence is love. No one tried to stop me when I walked inside. I grabbed my coat, my purse, the untouched bottle of wine. My heart was pounding but steady. I walked past the living room, the photos on the wall, my smile frozen between Lucas and Emily in every frame. I walked past the kitchen, the scent of food that suddenly felt nauseating. I walked out the door. No one called my name, no one followed, not even a whisper behind me. The door clicked shut and the party went on. I didn't look back, because I finally understood. Sometimes the cruelest thing a family can do isn't yelling or hitting or fighting. It's the quiet decision when they stop seeing you, and then blaming you for disappearing. The first thing I did after I walked out of that family gathering was turn my phone off. I didn't want to wait for a message that wouldn't come. I didn't want to stare at typing and wonder if they were crafting an apology or just a justification. I didn't want silence again, so I made my own. For weeks I didn't call, I didn't answer, I didn't show up, and the world didn't fall apart. No one banged on my door. No one begged me to come back. There were no flowers, no long, teary phone calls, just the same old nothing. But this time, the silence wasn't theirs. It was mine, and for the first time it felt clean. I started therapy. It was a small office near my apartment with soft lighting and one of those overused diffusers that made everything smell like lavender and lemons. My therapist, Miriam, was a quiet woman in her late 50s with gentle eyes and a voice like soft rain. She didn't rush, she didn't interrupt, she listened. The first time I cried in front of her, I apologized. Reflexively, automatically. She tilted her head and asked, "Why are you sorry?" I blinked. "Because I'm being a lot." She smiled. "You're being a person." That was the moment something cracked open. In every session, I peeled back a little more of myself. The girl who hid her report cards in her drawer because praise made her uncomfortable. The teen who brushed off betrayals like mosquito bites. The adult who still flinched when someone said dramatic. Miriam said something that stuck with me. You weren't too much. You were just too much for people who were only willing to handle parts of you. That sentence alone unraveled a decade of shame. One night, scrolling through Instagram, I came across a comment from someone I hadn't seen in years. Jess. Jess and I went to high school together. We weren't close then, but I remembered her as kind. She always offered gum to everyone, even the quiet kids. She was always the one who noticed who was left out. Her comment was simple. Your design work is amazing. Congrats. It caught me off guard. I hadn't realized she'd been following my work. I messaged her to say thank you, and that one message turned into 2, into 10, into coffee on a rainy Sunday morning that lasted 3 hours longer than planned. Jess didn't ask about my family. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened, ask questions, let me talk, let me exist without performing. She didn't flinch when I said, I don't really talk to them anymore. She just said, yeah, sometimes you have to protect your peace. And it was the first time that sentence didn't sound dramatic to me. Work started picking up. I had been freelancing quietly for a few years, branding projects, small campaigns, but I never really believed I was good enough. Now for the first time I did. Clients came back, referred others. I got asked to do a small rebrand for a local nonprofit, and when it launched, people noticed. I started getting DMs from young designers asking how I got started. Me, the girl who was too sensitive to handle real life. It wasn't overnight. There were still hard days. Days I doubted. Days I looked at my phone and wondered if they even noticed I was gone. But those days got fewer. I filled my space with better things, better voices. Jess became a regular part of my life. So did long walks, cooking for myself, dancing in the living room at midnight. I redecorated my apartment not to impress anyone, just to make it feel like mine. When my birthday came around that year, I didn't wait for anyone to remember. I bought myself flowers the day before. Tulips, my favorite. I ordered a cake from the bakery down the street with lemon cream frosting and had them write, Happy birthday, Claire, you're here and that's enough. I made a playlist, lit candles, and took a day off work, wore my favorite dress even though no one else would see it. Jess came by in the evening with sushi and a little plant she named Thompson. We drank wine, laughed too hard, and stayed up late watching movies I loved. It was small, quiet, simple, but it was mine, and for once, I didn't feel like a side character in my own day. A few weeks later, my mom emailed. It wasn't an apology, not really, just a vague note. Hope you're well. We miss hearing from you. Maybe it's time to reconnect? There was no mention of what had happened. No acknowledgement of the conversation. Just a vague sweeping under the rug that said, let's pretend none of it was ever said. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood. You don't have to re-enter the fire just because someone else is cold. People think healing looks like forgiveness. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes healing looks like not replying. Like choosing your own peace over someone else's guilt. Like celebrating your birthday with lemon cake and no expectations. Sometimes healing is quiet, undramatic, steady. And in that quiet, I found something I never had before. Safety. Not safety in being liked or approved or good. Just safety in being me. I'm not dramatic. I was just never allowed to feel without being corrected. It started with a LinkedIn notification. Someone had tagged me in a post linking to a magazine article, 10 Young Designers Redefining Community Brands. There I was, third on the list. Photo quote, and a short write-up about the nonprofit rebrand I'd done last year.